This is how Ronaldo risked being killed by a crazy fan. Messi, along with the entire Argentine national team, was on the verge of death in a plane crash. An entire country wanted to kill David Beckham, and Ibrahimovic had become the target of Sweden's most famous serial killer, Peter Mang. After 7 years of killings, detectives uncovered him, and Peter was sentenced to life in prison. Instead of keeping his crimes secret, he wrote an autobiography in which he confessed to what he had secretly done to Zlatan Ibrahimovic in the 2000s. Zlatan had become one of Sweden's most iconic athletes, and due to his celebrity status, Peter was not just a thirsty fan. He saw him as the perfect victim. Peter admitted to observing him from the shadows, analyzing every move. He saw Zlatan as an opportunity to gain visibility. One day, he saw Zlatan park his $1 million car in the middle of the street. Peter couldn't let the opportunity slip away. He ran home to grab a weapon. Not to damage Zlatan's car, but to take his life. When Peter returned, Zlatan was already gone, but the rest is history. Peter was sentenced to life in prison. Today, Zlatan can drive his cars and live in his house without worries, unlike the footballer who was the victim of a deadly attack. After Dele Alli spent $2 million on a mega villa, he thought that armed security 24/7 would protect him. But suddenly, everyone around Dele, even his teammates, began falling victim to robberies. And that wasn't even the worst part. Without Dele knowing, they were watching him in the shadows. And one night, while he was at home playing pool, a group of robbers burst in and caught him off guard. They brandished knives, beat him, and didn't leave without his entire collection of jewelry. Once found, they fled with $300,000, but Dele is lucky. At least he only lost his jewelry, because what the doctors tried to take from a football legend almost cost him his life. At just 19 years old, Thiago Silva traveled the world, aiming to become the greatest footballer of all time, but pursuing his dreams almost cost him his life. After a trip to Thailand, he suddenly fell ill. A cough, a bit of sweat, probably nothing serious. Thiago shrugged it off, but a few days later, the symptoms worsened. Struggling to run, walk, or even breathe, he was immediately rushed to the hospital. Doctors conducted test after test and discovered that Thiago's lungs were completely filled with lethal bacteria. They told him that if he didn't receive immediate medical treatment, he had only 2 weeks to live. And the only way to save him was to remove part of his lung. Obviously, in such a situation, it seemed like an obvious choice. But the tragic part of it all was that if he underwent the surgery, he would never play football again. Thiago faced the toughest decision he could imagine. But in the end, he gave in and the doctors went to work. After all this, Thiago's family knew he had risked everything for them, but they also knew he was suffering more than before. For Thiago, moving on without football was practically living without a purpose. So against the doctor's orders, he decided to push through. He took small steps, returned to the field, and dedicated everything to his passion until that decision became the best of his life. Because in the end, he became one of the greatest defenders in the history of football. A happy ending, but what happened to Ronaldo, surrounded by police and a lot of onlookers, will drive you mad. But we'll get there soon. In the meantime, imagine playing in the most important match of your career and risking being assassinated for that. It happened during the 1998 World Cup. David Beckham was becoming the face of football, and after being honored with the cover of FIFA 98, there was only one thing to do. His club hadn't won a World Cup in over 30 years, so if Beckham could help them achieve it, he would forever be the hero of the country. And we all know how much England loves its football. That game wasn't just about winning or going home, it was do or die. If only Beckham had known what he was getting himself into. Anyway, he went in, warmed up. Throughout the first half alone, both teams scored 2 goals each. And not only was it a tied game, but there were almost fights. So everything was building up until, with an entire country depending on him, Beckham lost his cool, received a red card, and was sent off. That single mistake literally cost his country the World Cup. The next day, Beckham went from one of football's most beloved players to an entire country literally wishing he was dead. Not only did Beckham become public enemy number one, but his entire family also became a target. For years, Beckham was afraid even to step outside his home because he feared that at any moment he could be at risk of dying. But in the end, for David, it could happen, yes. Instead, for Messi, during the qualifiers for the 2018 World Cup, death had practically become a certainty. Messi and the Argentine national team flew to Brazil for an anticipated match, thinking that the worst that could happen would be a defeat. Until things took a turn for the worse after a heavy 3-0 loss. The entire Argentine team was so embarrassed that they wanted to leave the country as quickly as possible. Instead of waiting for one of Messi's private planes, they all boarded the Bolivian Lamia for a last-minute flight. The takeoff was smooth, the guys were in the air, and it seemed like something they had experienced 100 times. But this time, they should have checked who was flying the plane. 4 hours after takeoff to Buenos Aires, the plane suddenly reported an error. What seemed like a routine flight turned into a life or death situation. The plane had been flying for 20 minutes beyond its fuel capacity. The pilots had only 18 minutes to land, or the worst would happen. As the plane began to shake, the pilots panicked, searched everywhere they could to transmit radio signals until they finally found a landing spot. With a few minutes to spare, the plane landed in a rush. Once on the ground, Messi and his teammates immediately got off the plane. Although they were traumatized, they had to be in another country by dawn, so they were forced to complete their journey on a different plane. What they didn't know was that it was a blessing, because after refueling, the Bolivian Lamia took off for another destination but never made it, crashing into a mountain and killing 75 passengers. Indeed, Messi is a lucky man. Such tragedies make you more aware, and it has surely helped him become the legend he is today. But when you have such success, not everyone can be a fan. Some are assassins. Cristiano Ronaldo learned this lesson the hard way. As we all know, Ronaldo has a certain obsession with cars. But considering that it has already put his life at risk, you would think he would have learned his lesson. Until one night after a game when things took a deadly turn. Ronaldo wanted to make a good impression for his girlfriend, so he took her for a ride in his brand new Audi R8. As we all know, Ronaldo doesn't just buy cars for their looks, but suddenly, all he could see was red and blue. So he pulled over as the officer approached the window. You would think Ronaldo would cooperate when the officer wanted his documents, but Ronaldo asked, "Don't you know who I am?" Refusing to hand over an ID, things escalated quickly. Being one of the most famous people in the world, as soon as chaos erupted, fans invaded the scene. But it was at that moment that a Ronaldo hater approached. You would think that with officers around, everyone would avoid breaking the law, but this guy was crazy. Right in front of the police, he literally threatened to kill Ronaldo. When the officers heard, they had to let Ronaldo go on his way because instead, they arrested the unbalanced hater. But Ronaldo is not the only one who has been a step away from death, a player who was inches away from losing his life on the field, or the moment when another player's entire family was taken hostage. These are the football players who almost died. You have to click to find out more. So what are you waiting for? The video is over. Click here, right here. Click on the video.